will divide blacks and whites even further in this country. And incredibly, it started over 100 years ago. When the Civil War ended, Congress actually voted to give 40 acres and a mule to every former slave. But that bill never became law. And now, those who call slavery an African Holocaust are demanding that the government pay incredible amounts of money, saying that their crusade for justice won't end until the bill is paid in full. Angry African Americans are calling this a matter of unfinished business. The fight is on, and it's all next, right here on The Maury Povich Show. This is a big issue. Should the United States government pay the descendants of slaves billions of dollars in compensation? Should they? No? No? Kind of dividing on racial lines around here. Johnita Scott's great-grandfather was half black, half white. His mother was a slave. His father was a plantation owner. And because of that, Johnita has become one of the leading activists fighting for what she feels the U.S. government owes, not only to her, but to the descendants of all the slaves, 4 million of them. Ron Daniels feels so strongly about this issue that he actually ran for president back in November, basing his campaign on getting compensation for African Americans. Johnita, it's been over, what, 100 years? Why should you get money for something that went on 100 years ago?
We can look at that really from two angles. One thing, we can say that anytime we could hold the people in slavery for over 200 years, and it took that long with people fighting and all kinds of uprisings and a lot of talk and back and forth among white people about slavery, and yet it could exist for over 200 and some years. On the one hand, it makes us not so surprised that it's taken over 100 years to get a redress. So it really has not been as long that we've been trying to get redress as the time that we were held. And one more thing I want to say, in another way, it hasn't been a long time ago, because the laws of discrimination, see, this is a fight not only for what happened during slavery, but for the laws of discrimination, which have only been off the books since in the 1960s. So we are talking about very recent history.
But could I argue that, wait a second, the United States government in 1861 fought to free the slaves from what they were living on?
Well, fundamentally, the first question is that we have to look at slavery as a tremendous genocidal act.
But I just want to go back. I understand all that. But wait a second. You're asking the government that basically took up arms to keep the Union alive and together and to free the slaves.
Well, the world took up arms in order, in part, to save the Jews from the Holocaust in Europe. That didn't mean that they didn't get compensation. The fundamental principle is any time a nation or people are violated and their human rights are taken away, it is on the nation that has done the violating to compensate for the damages done to that group. That's the principle that has to be established. And so the problem is that there's never ever been an apology, nor has there been for African people the question of compensation. We were released, freed, emancipated, no 40 acres and a mule, no capital in a capitalist society, no property, and in fact it didn't end there, because had we been released into a society where we were free and no discrimination, we were still handicapped because of racism and discrimination and lynching and all those things that have to be considered.
But Ron, you mentioned apology. Is that what you're looking for, Jennifer?
That should be one part of it. One part of it.
An apology?
Oh, it all has to go together. It has to come. It should come together. The reason we want the apology is because when our children study that slavery unit in school, they come out feeling bad. And I kept wondering, how can the children leave and the children of the former slaves are the ones with their head down And the people who held the people in slavery somehow come out to feel that this is okay. So we feel like the apology would put like that final chapter where when the children study, they come down to this bottom line that says, but the United States officially recognized that what they had done was totally wrong and entered into the congressional record was an apology for what was done. Now that cannot stand by itself. Let me make one more point.
Make it fast, because we have to go on. We have a lot of guests. We have a lot of ground to cover.
Okay, on something that was brought up, the 48% of Mule did not originate with black people. White people thought that this was the right thing to do. Congress voted for it. It was vetoed by an unjust president.
Well, nonetheless, it was vetoed by a president. Armstrong Williams is a frequent columnist for USA Today. He has his own radio talk show in Washington, D.C. He says blacks need to put slavery in the past and keep it there. So what are you saying?
You know, I respect the spirit of what they're saying, because there's no question that African Americans should have been paid for the injustice that was done to them. But the issue is, I think the Achilles heel of this country has been our inability to deal with the race issue, from human slavery to the Civil War to what recently happened in Los Angeles. And the issue is there are so many other issues that plague the African American community and other communities that we need to make the government focus their attention on. Reparations is not going to happen. It's another issue just to further divide the race.
But it's not going to happen because practically you're not going to get the United States Congress to vote for that.
It's not going to happen. Politically, it's not going to happen. Socially, it's not going to happen. Economically, it's not going to happen. Oh, let me finish. I listen to you. Thank you. All I'm saying to you is this. All I'm saying to you, let us spend our time and our energies on things that are worthwhile and things that can move us forward. We need to come together. Because many of the people in this audience had nothing to do with slavery. Let me finish, and we'll go back to you.
All right, okay.
Are you saying many white
people in this country who are born today,
whites or African Americans?
All people, many of them.
You could argue that every African American here had something to do with slavery.
You missed my point. Many of the people in this world today had to inherit this history. They want to move beyond that. I think there are white people in this country who are making a great effort to try to improve situations in this country.
We should move beyond it. My view is that it's an American issue. It's not a black issue. It's a part of a new covenant for a new society. This nation will never, ever heal itself until we have dealt with the question of the abuses that have done to the people who live here.
And you want an apology? You want an apology? Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Let me make the point. No, you want an apology?
We are all the beneficiaries of the dispossession of the indigenous people, the Native Americans who lived in this country. I had nothing to do with it. And yet, we are all in this country. We have to own up to the responsibility corporately. In the Old Testament in the Bible, when the Jews were held in bondage, it didn't matter that individual persons may have been good or had nothing to do with it. When God came through, he smote and put a curse on the land because Egypt, as a land, had been oppressing the people. There has to be a corporate responsibility. This nation has to own up to it. And it seems to me that this new covenant will be what heals us. We will never be healed until we have atoned for the crimes committed.
This is the problem I have with politicians. They just keep fueling these issues, dividing the races, and they continue to run for office. This is not a political issue.
All right. I'm not a politician. I am not a politician. I am not a scholar of history.
Both get a chance here.
Anybody who continues to try to make us live in the past, you can only heal when you learn from the past to do better in the future. And let me tell you, if you think that financial reparations are going to improve the status of African Americans in this country, you are kidding yourself.
I have problems with several things that Mr. Williams said. For one thing, he wants to say, okay, this is a political issue. It really isn't. This is an everyday issue. I work with an organization called Cobra, and this is an organization of just a lot of ordinary people, educated people, and I can assure him that we intend to win. We're not spinning our wheels. This is not an exercise in futility. We have people all over the United States who are involved in this issue. And there's a white group that is just put together to help us work for reparations.
Okay. this issue, we are going to hear from two people whose great-grandparents lived on the very same plantation. One was the owner, one was the slave. After this. Billions of dollars to African Americans because our ancestors turned their ancestors into slaves. My next two guests share an unusual historical moment. His great-grandfather owned her great-grandfather. Robert E. Lee IV is the great-grandson of the famous Civil War general Robert E. Lee. 130 years ago, General Lee owned the sprawling plantation Arlington just outside Washington, D.C. It was originally owned by his wife. It was the Custis family. He also owned this man, Lawrence Parks, along with dozens of other slaves. Now, Carol Huntley is the great-great-granddaughter of Lawrence Parks. This is the first time that these two have ever met. Please welcome them to our show. So what's wrong? What do you think of the idea that Carol and other descendants are owed money by the government for what they had to endure?
No, I don't think that's true. I'm delighted to meet Carol. In fact, she's one of the best-looking relatives I've ever had. I'm delighted to have her with me. No, I don't think that's... The trouble with our country today is we talk too much money, not education, and how we're going to get something accomplished. Money is not the answer to education. Money is not the answer for the black population. Money's not the answer for me.
But wait a second. Did not your family, all those years ago, make money off of Carol's family?
No.
They were slaves.
I can only...
If it weren't for the servants who were on the Arlington House Mansion, which was owned by your great-grandfather,
Well,
we weren't treated, and we did not do a lot of servile work, but we did, and as if you do have literature here, you will see that your family made income from the harvest that my ancestors did make for you.
You are absolutely right, but if you would look back in history, Lee was the son-in-law of Mr. Custis.
Right.
During the Battle of Fredericksburg, Custis died, and in his will, it said that if the plantation was out of debt, that the slaves would be freed. If the plantation were in debt, they would be in slavery for 5 years, and then they would be free.
In 1862.
That's right, and you have the date. And in Fredericksburg, when Lee was in Fredericksburg, I remember Fredericksburg, one of the few battles we won, he sent a letter stating that he now would allow probate to take care of the slaves because the debts were paid.
But Carol...
There was no real, when you say monies, of course they made money on the flowers, they made money on the harvest and that sort of thing.
Robert, wait a second. Don't you think that you're owed money from him?
We're owed money. I firmly believe not only, yes, we are owed money. We're owed money because a lot of my ancestors were transported or migrated or sent to the American colony in Liberia. I'm sure not of their own will, but because your great-grandfather or slave master George Washington Parke Custis and some other emancipators in that time thought this was a safe place for the slaves to go. We lost all of our family ties. We can't, even when we want to do a family reunion, we cannot even locate a lot of our
feelings towards him?
I feel that yes, we are relatives, because in reading some of the letters that his great-grandfather, some very endearing letters that his great-grandfather wrote to some of my ancestors, we probably are related, and we probably are relatives, and it's nice meeting you today. Mr. I mean, cousins are but on that same vein, we still were not treated equal as George Washington Parke Custis' wife, Mary, often alluded to, that we were created equal. We still were not free to go and come as we wanted to.
Well, that's true.
That's an important point. See, because I also have the white relatives, and the difference...
Do you know who they are?
Oh, yes. I mean,
I mean, do you know...
No, not now, but my dad told us who our white relatives
Which
were.
leads me
And
to the
it wasn't
point,
really a
how are
secret.
you ever going to be able to trace it? How are you going to
Okay, all right, but see what I want to say is that even though these white relatives even owned up to the fact that this was their brother and even taught him to read and write, but when it came inheritance time, he got no piece of the land.
And beyond that, there's a very important point. We have to establish the point that slavery, not in an individual case, but in a corporate sense, the free labor for over 250 years of Africans helped to fuel the Industrial Revolution, helped to make this country. It made enormous profits.
I don't think there'd be a person in this country who would not acknowledge the roles that African Americans played while they were slaves.
But it just doesn't deserve conversation.
But the point is that it's not, and beyond, and to Mr. Armstrong over here, Mr. Williams, we are in a state for the vast majority of black people today, locked in the ghettos of South Central and so forth. We are in a state of emergency today, a black state of emergency. And the question of money, I'm alarmed that you would say that in a capitalist society, money doesn't count. I mean, money is very important. So the point is,
Okay, we got the point.
it's a legacy. It's a legacy that has to be done.
Let me say this, please.
Wait a second. Go ahead.
It doesn't have to all be money. It could be scholarships. It could be land. It could be
We
property.
have all kinds of money. You realize since 1960, the federal government has given you people
You people, no, not you.
$2.3 million.
Lots of people, thank you.
Lots of people.
Thank you. Go ahead.
All people.
Good.
Now, Bob, honey, we don't talk that way like that.
Okay,
I mean, it was innocent. You have to educate them. They just don't know it any better. I'm not saying that person. Let me say this to you. No, you know, I am just amazed that in 1993, that we're sitting here talking about paying money to something that happened 100 years ago. You know, if it was realistic, you know, I mean, there are people of all walks of life who come in this country with nothing. Wait a minute, with nothing. Oh, yes, I am. Let me tell you something. You gotta start getting the key distinctions between every other ethnic group.
Can the two brothers just hold it for a second? We'll be back in a moment. We'll pick this up. We'll pick it up. You want to finish up your point, Armstrong?
Let me just make my point. All I'm saying is that there are foreigners who come to this soil with nothing and make incredible fortunes. But let me just say, no one has the history that African Americans have had in this country. It's a fact. The oppression, but we have built such a strong spiritual currency in this world until we've got to stop feeding them with racism and hopelessness. We've got to stop. It's out there, but you got to do more.
What's the money for the reparations will be used for? I think a lot of us are thinking that each descendant of a slave will just be given an amount of money and to blow it. I feel that reparations should be given, but there should be some guidelines stipulated as to how to use the money. Not just giving money and blowing it, but for an educational fund, if you have some of the research has shown that some economic development, business development, educational funds for pursuing college education.
We have a lot in the audience.
My question is for Janita. If you expect the government to pay off some of its debt, how do you expect them to pay it off as far as education or health? Or, you give a man a fish eats for a day, and if you teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime.
Okay. Like I say, I work with an organization, so I'm representing a lot of people more
How do you want it? Do you want everybody to get a certain amount?
No, I don't. No, I don't personally want that.
Because I've seen figures ranging from $40,000 a person to $90,000.
Right. But personally, that is not what I'm looking for. I want to see the money put totally under the administration of black people. It may mean that we will hold a plebiscite, which is a people's vote, where we would actually vote for economic development representatives from our various areas to administer the fund. And I can see it going to businesses, to education, and even to a large group of black people in the United States who would still like to relocate from this country to another country, but they should not leave here
input here, but you
Okay.
gotta give us time.
My statement is to this
Armstrong.
gentleman, Armstrong.
Yes, ma'am.
One, he said he was amazed, and I'm going to say you be amazed.
Thank
One, because slavery continues in the form of welfare, homelessness, and drug addiction. It continues. So you be amazed. Number two, my grandfather, great-grandfather, all my ancestors, as well as yours, worked very hard to build this country we call America. And if nothing else, because there's no justice here, basically, in America right now, when a Rodney King situation could happen like it did, slavery continues. When people continue to go to bed without food, slavery continues. And that people should be compensated, we as a people should be compensated for the difficulties that we have had. The other thing is that you say that we come, no, I heard you, so I want you to hear me.
Yeah, well, wait.
That we live in the past. See, 1 second. He said that we're living in the past. No, it's okay, and I'm so glad that my mother took the time to educate me, you see, because you said that we live in the past, and what I learned growing up is that if you forget your past, you are doomed to repeat it.
I never
And
said
so you need to study yours.
I never said we should forget the past. I said we should learn from the past to progress in the future. Let me ask your sister a question. One question I want to ask you. Do you blame slavery on those young blacks killing each other in their communities? And
No,
do you
I
blame
don't.
slavery on
No.
those young women having all those babies out of wedlock? We need to start taking
See, you have to
responsibility for
understand,
our own
one
ills.
second, Mary, because I have to respond. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. See, you have to understand the cause and effect here. You have to understand cause and effect, brother. It is not as simple as one black kid killing another black kid, or one teen mother getting pregnant and having a baby. It is much more powerful than that. It goes much deeper than that. The effects of slavery still continue. It was a small, if I can say it started out as a snowball that took full effect. And what we have now, it's in full bloom, that the process of slavery started, and we continue to carry it out on each other. Perpetuate it. So you have to understand slavery.
I not only blame slavery, I blame a system whose values would put property above people. That is the problem. We still live under a system that puts property, profit above people. That's what Martin Luther King said, and that's what brought slavery on in the first place.
There's a lot of white people in the same situation as you.
In terms of what?
In terms of slavery and not having anything. They really are. Why do you keep going to the past and keep bringing things up over and over and over? You have all the opportunities in the world. I'm saying the opportunities are there. Quit going to the past and think,
So
yes,
you
they are.
believe it on?
Look, my dad came over in the early 1900s without a cent to this country.
Wait a second.
Wait.
Now, wait a
Let me say
second. Give this lady a chance
So
to
you're
talk
not
now.
giving me a chance.
Go ahead.
My dad came over in the early 1900s in this country. He had $17 in his pocket. He didn't think anyone owed him anything. He loved this country. He couldn't speak English. He respected this country. He worked. And he ended up...
It was his choice.
That was his choice.
choice.
I didn't think this country owed him anything.
They were not standing on the shores of Africa saying, take me, take me.
Where's Africa? No.
We'll be back after this.
I volunteer.
Lots to know, lots to know.
Okay, I want to say, one, I agree 100%. What happened with slavery was absolutely wrong, and yes, you do deserve an apology.
Right.
But two, one, what the land was worth back then, it's not what it's worth now. What do you want? Do you want all that extra money? Do you want what it's worth today? And two, I really don't
They
think...
want programs. They want research set up. They want education funds.
Okay.
They,
You get it, but wait, one more thing. I don't think...
money value, but you're not listening to what, particularly these two guests here are saying, who work with organizations who are dealing with reparation, are saying that how the money would be used, how the reparation amounts would be used.
Why don't you want the money to go? Why don't you want the 40 grand yourself?
I don't want the 40 grand because I'm an educated African-American woman. I work with a program who I feel that I would like to apply to a reparation fund, if you will, where I could work with mentorship for young African-American
Who
women.
would want the money right in their pocket? 40,000, 50,000. What is a lot of
Now,
money?
if that happened, we'll probably go back on, probably
What's
tax
enough
back to
money?
government.
If 40,000,
Probably be
we all
taxed back
can't
to
talk at
government.
once.
And I want
How
to
much
put
more
another
money
tax
can we
bracket.
spend than we're spending now?
Well, he raises a good question. He says, how much more money can we spend? See, I have a figure. See, I think the figure ought to be at least $1 trillion. Because if we can
$1 trillion.
why not? $1 trillion. If we can waste $1 trillion on the S&L bailout, $600 billion a trillion, we can invest $1 trillion
$1 trillion into one organization, first of all. All right? Even if you get what you want right now, there's still going to be people out there that are going to still keep looking back and saying, look what they did to us. No matter what you do, you cannot get
So you're saying that's enough reason, you're saying that is enough reason not to do it just so we can keep people from looking back and saying, oh, look, I don't understand. I don't understand
how you can get more money.
First of all, I'd like to direct my question. I'll make a comment, then I'll direct my question to Mr. Armstrong. First of all, the comment is, black people are the only people on the face of this earth that have to live in the same country where they were oppressed.
That's a good
Number
point.
two.
Good point.
The thing is, he's talking about, we don't have to, no, we got too much invested, we're not going to leave. See, I know where you're coming. I got a trip invested in the World Trade Center. Number three is, we don't worry about what we're going to do with the money, talk about what is money going to do. If money is not important, why is everybody working for it? Number two is, we could, I'd like to ask this gentleman, why is it that you feel that that to give us money that we're going to misuse it?
That's the inference.
Why is it that you think that as a black man? Why do you think that we're going to misuse the money?
First of all, for the record, I never said that you would misuse the money. I'm just telling you that you're spinning your wheels because it's not going to happen. That you should try Let me finish. Thank you. May I finish? Thank you. You should try to concentrate your energies on realistic goals, not goals that will further divide the races and set us back and then set up more organizations where they funnel the funding and it never goes to the causes that it was set up for in the beginning.
Okay, let's move on.
I just wanted to answer that girl over there that said that $40,000 was nothing. To me, it is a lot, and it'd get you off welfare for a while if you were on it.
Yeah. When we're dealing with the issue of reparations, the idea is that we would come out of this better off than when we went in. So what she meant, just to give an individual $40,000 would not do what we are looking to have done for the race as a whole.
Right.
Yes.
Collective.
Okay, and to Mr. Lee, who thinks that money won't solve the problem. If you look around you at all the problems that we face in the community, most of them can be solved by some economics. When you talk about how much money is spent on the welfare system, anytime you still have a system that will not pay for a family of four $600 a month to live in an apartment, but will pay $1,500 a month for them to live in a room, we got a big problem. We're wasting money, and we need to use it properly. And if we get our money, that's what we'll do with it.
We'll be right back after this. We'll have a lot more.
Always been content just to observe an eclipse.